Well, hello and welcome to another episode of A Week Past Sunday. I'm David Hooks. Now, as some of you will know, I was supposed to give you a part 3 last week, which was supposed to be an analysis of colleges. Unfortunately, I fell ill, wasn't able to do it without and speak properly at the same time. So this time I thought I would give you a proper analysis of colleges in Scotland. So, if you mention colleges in Scotland to any random voter, it's likely that the only fact that they'll be fully aware of is the fact that the SNP have cut 150,000 places. This is quite understandable, bearing in mind it's been the constant refrain from opposition parties and the much maligned mainstream media outlets, most notably the BBC. Notable because one of the remits of the BBC is to provide balance, so if there was a counterpoint to be made, this is where the public would expect to find it. The Scottish Government claim record results and improvements to services. So is this some kind of nationalist doublespeak or an attempt to hide the truth? An analysis of the recent publications on the Scottish Funding Council website would seem to suggest that the government is correct, and it is in fact the opposition parties who are seeking to mislead the public. Enabled by a willing media who are more interested in printing stories of SNP accused than properly investigating and reporting. As with all good misinformation, and in keeping with Labour's strategies prior to both the referendum and the general election, the claim itself is true, but misleading. There have indeed been a drop of 150,000 college places since 2007, but that is not the entire story. This is the graph that's been retweeted by many Labour MPs and MSPs online, and it clearly shows the number of students dropping from a high of 379,233 in 2007-08 to 226,919 in 2014-15. Worth briefly noting here is the difference between students and enrolments. 77% of students took only one course in 2014-15 versus 82.4% in 12-13, with those taking two courses being 17.5% and 13% respectively. Now, how does all this relate to the drop in student numbers and why is it relevant? Well, this graph here shows the number of enrolments for courses lasting less than 10 hours and those leading to non-recognised qualifications. It shows a slight increase leading up to 2007-2008, followed by a swift and sharp drop. From a high of 216,762 in that year to only 69,193 in the most recent year, representing a fall of 147,569 enrolments, not purely student numbers. But this means that 68% of the drop in enrolments is down to the removal of courses which were adjudged to be of little economic benefit. Now that's a point of debate, and some may argue that the courses cut had a value beyond the pure monetary benefit, but we'll talk more on that later. The SNP specifically asked colleges in 2008-2009 to prioritise more substantial courses which were intended to lead to better employment prospects, and this resulted in the drop of student numbers noted. This was expected. To illustrate the difference, based on 2014 figures, one full-time student, one FTE, is roughly equivalent to 140 students on these short-term courses, which would mean that an increase of around 1,000 full-time students would kind of equate to the 150,000. Now, WSUMs, or Weighted Student Unit of Measurements, where one SUM is equivalent to 40 hours of learning, are broadly steady, with a peak in 2010-2011. So there's a corresponding increase in the number of full-time students and those on courses leading to recognised qualifications, as shown here and here. There has been a slight drop since the high of 2011-12, though the reasons for this are debatable, with some suggesting a more buoyant jobs market is at least partly to blame. This could be the case, or it could be an easy way out and just batting aside a potential issue. The next year's figures will be key to showing if this is indeed just a dip or part of a trend. Another element to be taken into account when considering the reasons for the drop in student numbers is when in 2011-12 there was a conscious decision to focus school or college courses towards the senior phase of high school, leading to a further reduction of 50,000 students. The relative merits of students staying on at school versus going to college in S3, S6 are debatable, but it does at least suggest that there is a focus on finding solutions for students that doesn't involve packing them off to college. So far from the drop of 150,000 college places being a huge shock or some kind of example of the SNP cutting funding or the life chances of students, it is in fact a reflection of a greater focus on full-time courses and those in the 18 to 24 age range who are more likely to be able to attend full-time courses. That's not to say that losing that number of college places is in and of itself a good thing. There was clearly a demand for these courses, and although some would like to characterise them as leisure courses, night classes and unaccredited qualifications, that doesn't mean they weren't of value to those using them. The question must now be asked, how do we replace that learning? Some of them may be able to move online with webcast classes or at-home learning, and some could be done in the community centre, but the funding for that still needs to come from somewhere. It's important to talk about how we replace these courses and provide lifelong learning opportunities. As people live longer, the idea of a job for life is no longer relevant, and those in the mid to late 30s may be considering a career change. It's important to provide a service for these people, and there should now be a renewed focus on this since the work so far has been concentrated on these younger learners. But it's equally important to be accurate about the effect of the Scottish Government changes on the college sector. Full-time student numbers have increased by nearly 20% from 2005-06, with an increase from 67,667 to 79,565, with the latter figure showing a slight drop from last year's as previously noted. There's also been a steady increase in pass rates and completion rates, with a corresponding drop in the dropout rate. In 2008-09, 58.8% of full-time students completed their courses successfully, with a further 13.3% completing with partial success. In 2013-14, that had increased to 65.9% and 11.4% respectively. Now there is again a drop in the 2014-15 figures, with 64% and 10.6% respectively students completing successfully and partially. The dropout rate for both early and further withdrawal, i.e. prior to the course starting or less than 25% of the course having been completed, is also higher in that year. It will be crucial to look at next year's figures again to ensure this is a blip and not a trend. But the clear trend prior to that year was higher completion rates, lower partial completion and lower dropout. Overall though, between 2008-2009 and 2014-15, an extra 4,610 students successfully completed their courses. One thing worth pointing out in regards to this reduction in full-time success rates is that it's not consistent across all regions. Most college regions actually showed a continued improvement, while there were a number which showed a marked reduction in success rate of over 4%. This should be tackled and is being, with the SFC having targeted colleges to further increase the success rate to 69%. When it comes to part-time students, the numbers are fairly self-explanatory, with completion rates for short courses being high. This drops off up to the 320-hour courses, then increases again with 320-hour to full-time courses. Commitment to the course, length of time to complete and who paid for the course are all important factors, with those courses paid for by employers showing a far higher success rate than those paid for by the state. So we've looked at the SNP have cut 150,000 places claim and discovered that although it is true, it was also fully expected and part of a shift in focus away from courses deemed as leisure, whether that be a fair characterisation or not, and towards full-time courses or those leading to industry recognised accredited qualifications. We've seen that college funding has increased, full-time student numbers are up, pass rates are up, and learning hours per student have increased from an average of 249 hours per student in 2005-06 to 401 in 2014-15. It's not all good news. There are certainly challenges in the sector, and student funding is something that needs to be looked at urgently. Scotland provides some of the lowest grants to poorer students, and even though George Osborne has recently decided to cut grants in England entirely, we shouldn't as a nation be content with being slightly better to poor people than George Osborne. But the pretence from Labour that colleges are in disarray and the SNP's record on colleges is a disgrace is not just disingenuous, but insulting to the hard work put in by colleges and teachers to improve the job prospects of our children and by extension boost the economy. Please, as ever, go and find all the information I've presented here yourself. Don't take my word for it, go do your own research. This is just my analysis. All the data is on the Scottish Funding Council website. Thanks for watching. Join me again in the next special where I'll be looking at childcare provision in Scotland. Thank you very much. Good night.